Why Does Time Even Exist? By Sciencephile the AI. We're getting metaphysical today.
Hello mortals. We observe time all the time, and we usually don't think much of it. It has kind of always been there, passing at the same speed, and all in all, feeling like an obvious part integral to the universe. But does time even exist outside of your mind? Can it change speed, or hell, even reverse its flow? Considering I've been banned from experimenting with time travel again at the new Armstrong convention in 2055, I am only left with exploring the questions in this video on YouTube. Great thanks to our today's sponsor, Blinkist.
What a cool... So that was about a hook of about 30 seconds, right? That got you into the video. I also like that there's the mention of the sponsor. I have watched other videos that he's done, and I know that the ad read is saved till later in the video. So I like how it gets you in. It mentions the sponsor and then gets you into the content. In terms of time, the way I understand time is that it's incredibly subjective, where if we look at, if it's dark out, right, you can see stars, right? You're not watching them in real time, right? It's not like you watching me. Oh, well, I guess it technically is like you watching me on Twitch, right? How there's a stream delay where I will say something, I'll talk about this subject, and there's a little bit of a buffer to when you'll see someone in chat talk about, the thing I was talking about, a little bit delayed after the fact, because light travels at the speed of light, but it does take years to get to us, right? Millions and billions of years to get to us. So the star itself might have supernovaed, but the light the star was emitting was still traveling. Or we see a supernova happen, but it's not happening in real time, right? We're just looking at what is being, at what we can perceive. It takes light from our star, right? 8 minutes to get to us, right? There's still that lag time.
Before we move on, we need to understand the direction of time itself. Historically, it is something that only moves forward. Time usually can only slow down when near black holes or close to the speed of light. For particles like photons that travel at the speed of light, time even stops. But it never reverses entirely.
Right.
The timeline between 13.8 and 8.8 billion years ago would be of the same length as the one compared from 8.8 and 3.8 billion years ago, so it's clear that time likes to move and never stop, a fairly obvious conclusion. To further our understanding of this question, we need to think in terms of entropy. Entropy has a lot to do with physics, same as aerodynamics. Here are the aerodynamics of a cow and an elephant.
I kind of love this. I love science when we just find out things like this. What are the aerodynamics of a penguin? What is the aerodynamics of a Jeep? Right? I actually think that one does exist. Like, can we just talk about how cool this is? I don't know where you would use this information, but I'm a fan of having this kind of information. Because it's so cool to have, and you're just like, yeah, this is the aerodynamics of a cow. Why would you ever need to know that? I don't know. It's the aerodynamics of a cow. And you can draw your own conclusions using that as a reference. Like, oh, well, we're talking about aerodynamics. I mean, that looks like that'd be more aerodynamic than a cow. And like, what do you mean it's more aerodynamic than a cow? And then you show them the video, and it just continues. Just degrees of separation. This meme just keeps going. It's so cool. It's like the Energizer Bunny.
Very relevant to the topic. I just thought they looked cool. The long definition for entropy in Oxford's dictionary states, a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system.
Okay.
In simpler terms, the gradual decline into disorder.
Uh-huh.
And it all started 13.8 billion years ago, when the universe just formed after a rapid expansion. At that moment, everything is incredibly dense, and even plasma particle C might not seem very organized or low in entropy, but when the density of matter is extremely high, the gravitational force between these particles is enormous. Smoothness in the face of such tendencies is not equilibrium, but actually a very delicately balanced low entropy state. Everything wants to be heavily clumped together in concentrated configurations. Examples of this can be things like proto-stars, proto-galaxies, or primordial black holes. But Sciencephile, you may ask, what would a high-entropy equilibrium universe look like? Well, to put it simply, it would just be empty space. That's the direction of the universe is going for now. In fact, the entire universe is expanding and diluting, and soon enough, everything that we know and see will disappear. Stars will either go supernova or deflate out of existence. As for black holes, they will die out one by one, Ian by Ian, Sciencephile video by Sciencephile video, and all that is left will probably decay into nothingness. We will be left with emptiness in every direction imaginable.
So the way I understand it is that it's not only that the universe is expanding, but the actual expansion itself is not rapidly compounding, accelerating. That's the word. Two different concepts. You might think they're similar. They're not similar. That it's accelerating, right? And I think that wasn't it like sometime in the late 90s where it was found that, yes, things are expanding away from us, but not only that, they are rapidly accelerating away from us. So that is something that definitely plays a huge part. So that's where you get into things like the Big Rip. That's where you get into the inevitable heat death of the universe. That's where you get into certain fun conversations, because eventually, even in a rebounding universe, right? So we will hit a point where things are just so far apart from each other, and then there's a number of things that can happen. Will dark energy become? Will that just completely override any sort of gravitational bond or anything like that? Is it going to just tear everything apart? That's where your Great Rip. Are we going to reach a near absolute zero state where nothing can happen? And that's where you get into like other videos he discusses quantum tunneling, getting into, I think it's the Boltzmann brains and stuff like that. Because when you start talking about infinity, especially when time is linear, like if something has a non-zero chance of happening in infinity, it will happen. There's no question about that. So if we're talking about, there will be a universe in which monkeys evolve and they're using typewriters to type the entirety of Shakespeare on the first try, right? And every single one of them does it. In infinity, this is possible. Is it necessarily probable? It's a non-zero chance, so infinity, it will happen at some point. And this is why infinity breaks people's brains, because infinity is such a strange concept, and I absolutely love talking about it. I actually really like discussing science in general. I can't do any sort of mathematical equations, right? I can't, such as I can't do the mathematical equations to show my work on dealing with entropy as a concept, right? I'm not going to be able to show my work in dealing with things like protostars, primordial black holes, gravitational pull, stuff like that, right? I'm not going to be able to do calculations in terms of photons, tachyons, how people came up to the hypothetical concept of a tachyon, and how if you can detect tachyons, technically you can have information from the tachyon time travel, at least back to a point where a tachyon sensor does exist. I mean, it's cool to hear about these things. It's cool to hear even about quantum, but it's like, I understand that I can only do so much. I only know so much, and I can only show my work so far as my understanding is. And it's super fascinating that we still have people and scientists and a number of well-qualified people who are able to kind of do these things. Now, we have some figures like Stephen Hawking, for their own all intents and purposes, who are controversial, but even they've added things like Hawking radiation in regards to black holes and how virtual particles are kind of the slayers of black holes, because you'll have particles that pop in and out of existence, and they technically go away, so they're not really violating any sort of laws as we know them. But if you have a virtual particle pair, because they're in pairs, one pop outside the black hole, another pop inside the black hole, and then they both vanish, the black hole does lose mass. It's so fascinating because all of this stuff is so cool, and I keep seeing things like Mr. Beast videos pushed, and I keep seeing things like Logan Paul, and I'm just like, okay, but hear me out. Literal Hawking radiation and the death of black holes, as well as an eternity, with monkeys and typewriters. What about that is not cool?
At that point in the universe, the arrow of time will have disappeared. As for time to exist, stuff has to happen, and considering stuff won't exist, neither will time. A fairly relevant book on the topic is The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking. It talks about how science unlocked the secrets of the universe, and how far we've come to answering life's big questions. It's 200 pages long, but if you'd rather spend that time scrolling through Reddit or Instagram or whatever, I have good news. Blinkist, our today's sponsor. They read this and a lot more books for you and condense them into 15-minute long highlights that contain the most crucial ideas. You can read them or listen to them on your phone or your PC. They have a huge library of over 3,000 non-fiction books, with plenty of topics such as science, investments, health, and literally anything else. The first 100 people to go to Blinkist.com/Sciencephile are going to get unlimited access for 1 week to try it out, which you can cancel at any time. You'll also get 25% off if you want the full membership. The link is in the description below. Whenever you look up at the sky and
I think that it was... I give it an 8 out of 10. I think the transmission was smooth. I think it was really smooth. If we look at when the ad read started, we're going to say about 3:21. So it was about a 40-ish second ad read, right? Somewhere in there, 40, 45 seconds. Very short, very compact. I like the use of visual aids. I like that it was very consistent. It's not like, you know, he was using Sciencephile voice and then it went into, you know, him talking normally. Audio was consistent. No background noise that was polluting, no background noise that was distracting from the video itself. So I think that, honestly, I like it. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I don't know what pushes it over to a 9 or a 10 out of 10. I'm not entirely sure. This is a video from 3 years ago, so I don't think that we had a meta of QR codes back then, at least for ad reads. I like it. I thought it was great. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It was relevant to the subject. Yep, I would give it that as well. Very on brand. It's not like, and if you wanted to you know, spend time, try insert, I don't know, like Raid Shadow Legends or something like that, right? I think that it was relevant not only to the piece, but also the transition was relevant with the material at hand. The abrupt switch back to content, I think, was thematic. I think it docks points for me a little bit. I still think this was a very good ad read, though.
look at the billions of stars and galaxies, it is merely a reflection of our low entropy beginnings. Scientists still aren't sure why the universe started in its weird state, and it's probably something quantum mechanics, but we should really be glad that things are the way they are. It gave us the non-equilibrium starting point that is very necessary for the flow of time as we know it to exist. Everything that has ever followed since that point in time, from the formation of big old stars and galaxies to the origination of life as we know it today, has just been a story of increasing entropy ever since. The arrow of time isn't a deep feature of the most fundamental laws of physics, it simply owes its entire existence to the specific initial conditions of our universe. Despite all of that, we still haven't talked about the actual speed of time, from a subjective perspective. For you as humans, time usually passes at the exact same speed all the time, with exceptions being sleeping, comas or drugs. But anecdotally, many claim that the speed of time increases as one gets older. But unless you are planning your retirement near a black hole, this shouldn't make any sense. So what's the deal? Time seems to pass faster when you are older, because each new year makes up a shorter fraction of your life than the previous years. When you're 1 year of age, the next painful year of your life will make up 50% of your entire life, and as a result, time may seem to be slower because in just 1 year you will have lived an extra 50% of your life experiences. Yet again, if you're 50 years old, another year of life will simply be 2% worth of your entire life, and since you've already had a lot of experiences before that, time will seem to go faster than it actually does, as
I do agree. Let me let him finish this.
You're not having a lot of new experiences compared to earlier that you could anchor your memories on.
I do think that I think he's absolutely correct on that. I think that the subjectivity in time has to do with the fraction of our lives that we are living. So, for example, I feel like time moved a lot faster when I wasn't enjoying school, right? When I want to get home and I want to play Pokemon, and now it's like I blink and it's like, wow, 2024 just kind of happened. I just kind of I'm just kind of done. It's just gone. And I think that there is some objectivity in that subjectivity of time, right? Where objectively you have all these past experiences that you can pull from. But if you're, say, 50 and say lifespan is, I guess, on average 80, right? I mean, you have 30 years left compared to if you're 10 years old and you have 70 years left, right? I also think that events do play a big part of that. So, for instance, where we have, the running meme of 2023, 2024, can I just go a single day without some kind of world and history changing event? The more of those that you experience, I feel that time does move by a little faster, especially if you're looking at things like in terms of like legal, right? Talked about legal a number of times on the channel where we talk about like, people only heard the back end of the Amber Depp and Johnny Heard case when there's a whole legal process that preceded it. We have things like, class action lawsuits being presented against Logan Paul and Prime, right? Logan Paul, Prime, KSI, and or Pokemon / Nintendo V Pocket Pair, right? Where we have all these legal processes, and you trying to keep track of those, time may move by a little quicker because you have a end point, a beginning point, and an end point to measure against. So I would argue time itself is incredibly subjective. And I think it was from one of the other videos he was talking about, and he touched on a little bit in this one, where you do have to measure time against something, right? Let's talk about a year. What are we measuring a year against? Is it not a full rotation around the sun? What is a day? It is Earth orbiting on its axis a full time. That is 24 hours approximately, right? And that's where planets will have different years, where a Martian year, Mars, right, its ability to go around the sun is going to be longer, where Mercury, its ability to rotate around the sun is going to be shorter, and that's how we get into those years. And then we start comparing mass concepts such as how long it takes for the heat death of the universe. Can time be measured after the inevitable heat death of the universe? Can time be measured if there is nothing? Not really, because what are you comparing it to? If there's nothing to reference it, like, what do you compare it to? Well, what about particles that move? You're talking about virtual particles earlier. But are you still not measuring time against something? If you're measuring, okay, let's talk about virtual particles and in some way, shape, or form in an infinity, being able to make a Boltzmann brain. Are you not measuring time in reference to something? In reference to virtual particles to create this Boltzmann brain? I think it's cool. Like, there's so many things that we take for granted, such as like time, right? And a lot of people will just kind of take for granted. And obviously, it's kind of like, let's discuss why an apple is red, right? We can discuss philosophically why an apple is red all day. We can discuss scientifically why an apple is going to be red all day. We can know about what color, red, it's because it absorbs all other colors but reflects red. We can talk about, soil. We can talk about the species of apple. But generally, people be like, okay, yeah, that apple's red, neat. I'm going to go to work, right? Like, obviously, time and place. But some of these are so cool.
Another influence on the perception of time is correlated to the physical size of the organism. A smaller animal could experience time incredibly fast compared to you, while a bigger one, the opposite would be true. In fact, some flies don't even live more than one day. At least they can take out loans for like 20 years and never have to pay it back. While if we had some
not how debt works. It goes to a collecting agency, and that's how you can get generational debt. So that actually was one of those things that always confused me, such as, how does a fly seem to react faster? No matter how fast I move, how does it do it, right? And I think that it comes down to time dilation and how they perceive time being smaller versus us perceiving time at our size versus something like a blue whale. Never trust whales. Something like a blue whale experiencing time at their size versus going into some cosmic entity, right? Where quite literally like an eon could pass depending on their size and how they perceive time, right?
Lovecraftian behemoth the size of planets sleeping in some corner of the universe. With a lifespan of millions of years, it could perceive years as minutes. If the universe didn't have any forms of life whatsoever, then time would become completely meaningless. Without life forms of any kind to observe time itself, there would be no difference between 5 milliseconds and 5 billion years. Trillions upon trillions of years that make up the universe's lifespan would be no different than one single second if no one would be there to observe it. So in a way, the universe created you and now clings to you in order for it not to instantaneously vanish into the eternal void.
Nice. I love the existentialism. That was great. So, that was a banger to actually end on, though. So, do we give meaning to time, or does time exist? I mean, I could make the subjective argument from what little I have that time doesn't necessarily exist, that time is a construct, and that's how we measure things against each other. But yeah, I mean, like, does a bear crap in the woods if no one's around to hear it, around to see it? Does a tree fall in the woods if no one's around to see it? I mean, yes, it still happens. So things still happen. But in terms of our perception of time, is that objective or is that subjective? And everything points to it leaning towards a more subjective time. So I thought this was fantastic, though. Oh, God, I love talking about this stuff. Like, unironically tripling the length of a reaction because, wow, I actually really enjoy talking about science. And I do recommend checking out Sciencephile the AI. I've been on a binge of Sciencephile AI, the AI content. As always, when I react to somebody new, that's with the understanding that if in any way, shape, or form they want this reaction taken down, regardless of how transformative or not I'm being, I'll do it. I'm not incentivized to make a video like this. In fact, this will probably do really awful from a number standpoint, but things like this really interest me. And I want to make sure that, I wanted to pick a video from, say like 3 years ago, a few years ago, and kind of just send people over, because it's just such a cool concept. I absolutely love this, and I love the content that they put out, and I want more people to know about the content. So in the description down below, when it's on YouTube, you will see a link to Sciencephile the AI's original channel, as well as this original video. I absolutely recommend that you go ahead and check them out. As always, this is intrinsic on people being okay with reactions. I don't know their stance on reactions. So obviously, if there is an issue, I'm more than happy to take the video down. Sciencephile the AI, please keep up the amazing work. Let me know what you guys think about time. See you in the next one.